Welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at useReducer. useReducer is another hook that is used to manage the state of our application, or better say, state of our component. So let's go and see how we can do that. As our component grows in complexity, it can get harder and harder to see at a glance at what happens in the component, so to say. So for example, this component that I called tasks holds an array of tasks, and it has two event listeners, handle add task and handle delete task, to add and remove tasks from the tasks list. As you can see, each of these event handlers set the state of our component. This uses set task, which is defined here, and also this one sets the task, which is defined here as well. And I have two simple components, add task and task list. On the add task, it will receive a on add task prop that we sent here, and it would only have an input with a button that will trigger the add task, which is this function here. Same here for the task list. It gets the list of the tasks and a on delete task, which is this handler here. It renders the tasks here, and for each of them there is a button that deletes the task. And if I go here and say task 3, I can add it and I can delete it. Great. So let's get back. So as our component grows, so does the amount of state logic that is sprinkled throughout this component. To reduce the complexity and keep the logic in one easy to access place, we can move the state logic into a single function outside of our component, which is called a reducer. Reducers are another way to handle the state. We can migrate from using state to using reducer in 3 steps. Step 1 is moving from setting the state, as we are doing here, to dispatching actions. Step 2 is writing a reducer function, and step 3 is using that reducer function inside our component. So our event handlers currently specify what to do by setting the state. Instead of telling the React what to do by setting the state, we can specify what the user has just did by dispatching some actions from our event handlers. So instead of doing this, I would just say I am dispatching an action, as I just said, and this action will include a object. For example, for adding a task, I would say type added, ID is the task's ID is this one, the same thing here, and the text is this one, the same here. By convention, it's common to give a string type that describes what just happened and pass any additional information in other fields. If you have been using Redux, you would be familiar with something called a payload here, which is another object which includes these two data. But for simplicity, I would just remove that one and have the data being added here. The important thing is that the type, or the value that we use for the type, should be something that tells what just happened. So we can say added or task added or added task or something like that. Now I can remove this part and dispatch another action for handling the delete. In this case, the type is, let's say, deleted. And the only thing that we need to pass is the ID of the task that was deleted, which is the task ID here. And we don't need the text. And I can remove this part. Okay, so far I have defined 2 dispatch functions with two actions, one for adding and one for deleting. Next step is that we need to write a reducer function which will act based on these actions that has been set. So I would say a reducer.js and I would define the reducer function here. So function reducer, if I can spell it, so reducer, and this function will take two parameters. First is the state, the current state, and the second one is the action that has been passed to it, like so. By convention, it's recommended to use the switch, and we should switch based on the action dot type that is being sent here, which is this value, because this object is action and we are switching based on this value and this value. And here I would say case, let's say added, and by convention we use these blocks so that if we define anything here, it stays inside this block and doesn't affect others. And at the end of each case we would return some state so that the code will not fall through to the next case that may cause to some mistakes. So for added, we would just say get the tasks, or get the state, which is the tasks that has been passed here, and then add the new task that has been sent by the action here. So id is the action.payload, action.id, and the text is action.text. Okay, let me have it default beforehand so that all those squiggly lines go away, and in this case we just return the state without any change. Great, and we need to have one case for deleted as well, and case deleted, we just return the state dot filter task, where the task ID is not the action.id. So if you go back here, for deleting, we just send the task ID of the task that needs to be deleted. And here in the reducer, we're just filtering out that value. So this is our reducer, and we need to export it here as well. So export function reducer from here, and of course we need to get it here. So import. I think it's better that if I go here and change this to task reducer, something like this, so it's more descriptive, and here I'm just getting that task reducer. Great. So I need to save this one, and then the last step is that we need to hook up the useReducer to our component. So I would go here and I would import the useReducer here. So use a reducer like so, and I don't need any state here. I am just using the reducer with two parameters. First one is the task reducer, the function, and the second one is the initial value. Initial value is the same, and here instead of set task we have a dispatch function. As we can see, the useReducer hook is very similar to the useState hook that we already had. We must pass in an initial value or initial state, so to say, and it returns a stateful value and a way to set the state. Let's go and test it. I have a task number 3, and if I add it, it will be added here. I can delete task number 2 and so forth and so on. Alright, this was about using the reducer. As you can see, in the add task and in the delete task, we only dispatch a function, and all the logic in setting up the state is done in this reducer function here, which is basically separate and in another folder, in another file, and it's easy to read and understand. In the end, there are two things that we need to keep in mind when we are writing reducers, and they are that the reducers must be pure functions. So the same input should always result in the same output. They should not have operations that impact things outside the component. So for example, we shouldn't do a fetch request here. We shouldn't have any side effect, timeouts, and stuff like that. Also, each action should describe a single user interaction. Even if it leads to multiple changes in the data, it should always be a single user interaction. For example, if we have a reset button in a form that goes and deletes like 5 or 6 different fields in a form, it makes more sense to dispatch a function reset form instead of going and having like 5 or 6 different set fields actions. So yeah, this was about using Reducer. Thank you for watching. I hope you have enjoyed the description and have learned something about this powerful React hook, and see you in the next video.